please take it away.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you everybody for having me here today. I was invited some time ago by Jason to speak to your group, and we agreed that probably this subject would be of value to you, which is a little bit about some new reach that we're trying to do to encourage and support antimicrobial stewardship across Canada. And now I have to make this work. There we go. So first of all, I want to acknowledge that I live and work on Treaty 1, which is the original lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Denisulan peoples. And Winnipeg is where I live, is on the homeland of the Red River Métis Nation. At NCCID, we work to respect the treaties that were made on these territories. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and present, and commit to move forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. I don't have any conflicts to disclose, but I do want to say that these two gentlemen have done a tremendous amount of work that allows me to put together a few slides and simplify all the work they put into a review of literature that led to the Do Not Flush strategy that we're talking about today. So I'm just going to talk ever so briefly about NCCID's mandate and some of our work in knowledge translation and antimicrobial resistance and stewardship, as well as use. A little bit about what we felt was missing, our project of just beginning to explore, dabble, if you will, in the area of pharmaceuticals and wastewater, and then the encouraging, a program of encouragement for as one step towards an AMS strategy. And then I do hope we have time for questions and discussion at the end. In Jason's introduction of me, really he spoke about all of the national collaborating centers for public health. It's a program of 6 such centers, as the federal government often sets these up under a contribution agreement with various host organizations. So although we're geographically dispersed and we each have our own topic areas that we focus on, in fact, we all have national mandates, and we were set up post-SARS, so nearly 20 years ago, to shorten the gap between knowledge and evidence of different forms and putting things into practice and policy for public health and to improve the health of populations. So in the introduction, we just touched on some of the subjects that NCCID is involved in. We do have shared projects across the centers and lots of networks that we've been building over the years, and endeavoring to move sophisticated kinds of evidence and information into usable formats for public health writ large. So in the case of antimicrobial resistance, stewardship, and use, our involvement in that work at NCCID really spans almost the full time that we've been in existence. We have developed numerous products, webinars, and networks over the years to support and encourage Canada's response to antimicrobial resistance. For many of you on the front lines, you'll appreciate that that's been very much up and down over the years. The federal government's current AMR task force is a bright star that's, I think, starting to figure out its way on the leadership that Canada needs to regain in the area of addressing antimicrobial resistance and supporting stewardship. Even here in Manitoba, where I live, a few years ago, there was a real interest in AMS, not too surprisingly sparked by pretty poor ratings on accreditation at various facilities in our health authorities. We worked very closely with one regional health authority, for example, in 2016, 2017, generated a lot of interest, did a lot of work with their medical, clinical, pharmacy teams. But then, COVID came along and there were provincial cuts to various systems. So sustaining the interest in AMS is, as you may know, quite challenging. Our main lead in the area is actually Harpa Eastfeld Keeley. She's unable to attend today, so I'm really presenting on her behalf as well. But many of these items that you see here as part of our knowledge translation formats represent the work that she was involved in or has led in various capacities. Just pay attention a little bit to the non-prescription pads. That is a format that has been in use through NCCID for almost the whole 15 years, providing physicians and other clinicians with something to write on and send people off with in hand, even if an antibiotic isn't the right prescription for them. They have been immensely popular. We just received another order for 500 pads of 500 each or 100 each. So that kind of tool, as they're called, in people's hands can be so very, very helpful in propelling the work of AMS and AMR prevention, but keeping it in the eye of those who are on the front lines. I also just want to draw your attention to our website that we host on behalf of so many organizations. It's antibioticawareness.ca. It's .ca. You can also get to it if you enter antimicrobialawareness.ca. We host that site on behalf of our many partners. The main campaign is for Antimicrobial Awareness Week in November, but the information is relevant and the resources can be downloaded at any time. So that's just a glimmer of the work that we've been involved in for many years in this area. But regardless, the area of One Health is one that crops up a lot, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. I do see it gaining more traction, particularly in the last 7 to 8 to 9 years of understanding what it might mean and how we can think about One Health as a way of addressing issues like antimicrobial resistance. So the WHO has a nice little definition. It's an integrated, unifying approach to balance and optimize the health of people, animals, and the environment. And the topic of One Health, I just have put here a timeline, has come up in our work, repeatedly in different ways. What can we do about One Health? Our own mandate is specific to human health, and yet we can't ignore the the call that One Health compels us to look across sectors. There is some progress. The Western Canada One Health stewardship meetings that have been going on for the last several years, we've been taking part in, helping to facilitate. I think there's been real momentum there on what this One Health concept means, bringing in the animal sector, bringing in livestock, agriculture, and so on. But in many of these discussions that we've been part of, there's just not a lot of attention to environment, except to say that it's important, that it's an aspect that we have to get to. And this is what brings me to what I wanted to talk to about with you today. We hosted, on behalf of the federal government and some other partners, we hosted a meeting in January of 2019, which was really in many ways supposed to be the culmination of consultations towards the much anticipated AMR action plan, which was to be the Pan-Canadian Action Plan. And the meeting in January of 2019 was to talk about all things regarding surveillance, AMR surveillance. And it was a meeting of about 80 some people. There were the chairs from the various committees at the FPT level. And if not deputy ministers, then their immediate right-hand people were there. And we talked a lot about what was already good and in place, such as the developments with CPARs on the animal side and the still very fractionated surveillance that we have on the human side, because each of the surveillance systems has its own history, and there's a whole reason for that. But again, this was a conversation where environment just seemed to not be there, except everybody saying, gosh, that's important. So we came back at NCCID and determined that this was an area that we wanted to contribute to in some small way. We knew that according to CARS, and this is the 2016 report that I'm referring to, Most of the antimicrobials prescribed to humans are dispensed in community, and a lot of them, a lot more dispensed for animal use. And that the UN Environmental Program report called Frontiers 2017 linked discharge of drugs and chemicals to the growing issue of AMR worldwide. And according to the Council of Canadian Academies, about 40, I'm not sure what the dollar sign there is, I must have mistyped it, but $40 million worth of Canadian, 40 million Canadian, 40 million, oh, sorry, $40 per person is disposed of unused and expired medications by dumping them in the drain, flushing them down the toilet, or putting them in the garbage. That was the estimation at the time. So to just get something going from NCCID's point of view, we decided that we would look into what their evidence there is on understanding pharmaceuticals in the environment, how they influence AMR, and the scope and the nature of disposal programs in Canada, using and reflecting on any international examples that we might find that could serve as exemplars for what we could do here in this country. This is where Zishan Kader did all his work. He did a fairly comprehensive review of the, through various databases to look at the peer review literature. We won't say that it was a systematic review nor a complete scoping review, but we did get a good sense of the type of literature that was available. We didn't find a lot that was particular to pharmaceuticals, i.e. prescribed drugs, and had something to say about antimicrobial resistance. So of 109 documents retrieved, 102 were used to inform the review of evidence that he put together. Essentially, the findings are that there are examples of antimicrobials in the water systems and that there are measurable specific effects on some aquatic environments. There have been, we looked at what regulations there have been successive federal documents to strengthen the legal frameworks in Canada to reduce contaminants in water, wastewater. This includes industry, so it's not just about personal use in the community. And that includes, among those wastewater pharmaceuticals, the NCCEH is our sister center, the National Collaborating Center for Environmental Health, and they have a number of very interesting blogs and documents about drinking water supply and private public water spaces and managing the guidelines for wastewater management. But two significant ones that I wanted to draw your attention to is that in 1992, so 30 years ago, the Canadian Council of Ministries of the Environment issued its national guidelines for managing biomedical waste in the environment to streamline waste management and disposal practices in the provinces and territories. And Health Canada, the Health Canada Directorate of Controlled Substances released recent guidance for pharmacists, practitioners, and practitioners on handling and destroying unserviceable stock, so unused stock, including post-consumer returns from the general public. I think for time. Zishan also looked across every province and territory to understand this was 2019, 2020, so you may have more recent information than I do, where disposal of pharmaceuticals is regulated or not. And so you'll see that there is a bit of a mixture. There are a number of provinces where there's voluntary return of pharmaceuticals, but it may not be regulated. And so here I've just highlighted those that are not yet regulated or weren't at the time of our scan. And then in the case of at least two of the territories, there isn't anything in place at all. There's no take back for unused medications. There are, however, some very interesting non-governmental organizations that we found at the time that have appropriate disposal of antimicrobials and pharmaceuticals on their radar. And these are just some of them that we found at the time. They are still operating, especially the Health Products Stewardship Association And CADITH, which is at the bottom of the list, has an ongoing interest in supporting this, not necessarily as an antimicrobial stewardship practice, but by encouraging practitioners and the general public to return unused drugs, it contributes to stewardship approach to reducing AMR ultimately. Gordon Thane was the other author on the document, and we asked him to look at international examples. So he did a scan of some countries. Again, not comprehensive, but looking at equivalent countries in terms of income level and attention to managing pharmaceuticals. Not a lot in the US, you'll see none, although it's managed state to state. We didn't try to go into that. But in the case of France and Sweden, actually they have quite an involved structure in place and requirements for returning pharmaceuticals. So in France, that is under the heading of Cyclamed. It's an organization that's a nonprofit. They are legally responsible in France to organize the take back programs that they have. And actually there's a law that requires all pharmacies to participate in collecting unused medications from the general public. This program, however, does not cover hospitals, dental offices, vet clinics. It's really about interactions with the general public. And part of what they do is advertise to the general public about, don't put your drugs down the drain and toss them in the toilet or throw them in the garbage. And similarly, in Sweden, the company that they have there is a not-for-profit, which is state-owned, called Apotek AB. All the pharmacies are operated by this organization. They have very much a system of take-back disposal drugs. In fact, I happened to be reviewing a peer-reviewed paper that happened to be by Swedish authors about something else, and it was taken for granted that the take back was going to be part of how in this case they were looking at other drug use. And as a reviewer, I had to say in one of my comments that this is not universally the case, that this is specific to Sweden and would need to be explained in the course of their paper. But my point is that it's so much ingrained as part of their response to dealing with pharmaceuticals and wastewater that all customers are given a clear bag and instructions on where and how to return their leftover medications. So looking at all of the information and evidence that we gathered in this review, it became clear that there are particular roles for prescribers and dispensers, those roles are shared in terms of operating systems that take back pharmaceuticals, as well as educating the public about proper disposal. And there's still very much a role to educate policymakers about the importance of formal medication return programs as a means to prevent environmental pharmaceutical pollution and reduce AMR ultimately. So then we wanted to know what we could do next, because the review of evidence is pretty boring. You find it on our website, and it doesn't really put the information directly in the hands of the people who need it. However, just as we were planning all of this, COVID came along, so we got a little sidetracked, as you can imagine. So we did devise, with the help of a very keen team of folks in Ontario, a series of 5 posters that we now make available through our website in much the same way that we do those prescription pads that I mentioned earlier. So in this case, this is the first of the 5 posters. It explains why it's important to safely dispose of unused and expired medications. We talk about environmental pollution, as you can say, but we also tie it to antimicrobial resistance for those folks who are paying attention to that and have been learning about antimicrobial resistance. So that's the first of this. This one is actually also produced as a small card that can be left in public health offices, can be left with pharmacists. It could go in as an insert into med bags by pharmacies with new customers if they choose. This is the same thing, another insert that can go with someone who's just been dispensed new drugs, very clear about what they can do, where to take them, and has this QR code, as do all of the posters, which I'll explain in just a minute. We devised one poster that's particular to pharmacists and prescribers to explain, even when they're receiving samples from pharmaceutical companies, why they should not just throw them out, put them down the sink, put them down the toilet, but instead have essential conversations in a practice team, for instance, about why appropriate disposal is so very important and become, we hope, a regular practice. And then we have a couple more posters that a pharmacy could put up on site. Simple explanation of what to do. And we've translated, in this case, this is the Cree version that we have. We have the posters in French, English, Cree, and Inuktitut. And we're starting to get some nice pickup on them. So the QR code is consistent across the posters. It takes you to this site, the Health Products Stewardship Association, which has a lovely, easy to understand, this is the top of their website, still repeats the message of don't flush, don't pour your old meds down the sink, and don't put them in the garbage. And then if you scroll further down the same page, some idea of where, in particular in British Columbia and Ontario, what can be included in a safe return program and things to leave out. And down the same page, you start to get, which is really the point of the QR code, where can I dispose locally? Which pharmacies have a take back program in my area? Because even though it's not regulated in all provinces and territories, there are many pharmacies that do have take back programs, even as we still want to encourage others to do the same. So we think that with this kind of multi-level encouragement, there will be at least some return for the environment, some diminishment of what goes into our wastewater, and I think primarily awareness of this is one way of encouraging antimicrobial stewardship and reducing AMR. However, I can't say that we have any outcomes just yet. We have had many, many requests for the posters. We've distributed them quite widely. They are available to you free. We'll ship them out to you. They come in the packs of set of five, but we'll send you as many as you like. We have had a tremendous number of click-throughs, though, when we actively promoted them through our various distribution means, like we used to be on Twitter, LinkedIn, and so on. But regardless, we have not yet set up an evaluation of any kind to see if we've been successful in contributing to AMS through this approach. So that's really all I wanted to share today. I'm always mindful of the time, particularly that I got started a little late. So very happy to take any questions from anybody or comments.
Thanks very much, Margaret. I'm just going to